My name is Juniper, and I just turned 19. Mom declared that life would be superior without me handling everything, so I agreed to let her validate that claim. By Thursday, the household's expenses were ignored, my younger sister was in tears, and Child Protection Services, CPS, personnel arrived at the doorstep of our Phoenix, Arizona home. "We are weary of you making everything revolve around yourself, Juniper," Mom stated, signing a formal document on the tablet I had purchased for her. "This document limits you exclusively to sibling duties. No more pretending to be their mother. Sign it." My siblings, Luke and Olivia, aged 16 and 18, stood behind her, their expressions icy and judgmental. "Juniper, you're not as essential as you think. No one asked you to take on this role." The bitter irony was inescapable. My early life ended at age 11 because I had to become the guardian my siblings desperately needed. This was all while our biological mother was constantly preoccupied with her various partners. Only a week prior, she'd asked me when Olivia would finally mature. Olivia had gotten her first period 4 years ago. I forced a smile as I signed the document, holding eye contact with each of them, all radiating a sense of entitlement. Why couldn't you have just been honest? If you want me to be a sister, that is exactly what you will receive. They exchanged triumphant glances, as if they had just won the lottery. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Mom celebrating her victory. "Everything is already significantly improved," she told her new boyfriend over speakerphone. "Should have taken a firm stand years ago." My siblings strolled through the Arizona house, cheerful over their perceived win, consuming food I had cooked last Sunday and wearing clothes I had laundered. This is how a healthy family operates, not a Juniper dictatorship. At that precise moment, I made the decision to grant them their exact wish. On Monday morning, I treated myself to my very first breakfast at Starbucks and even experimented with the trendy ice roller. Meanwhile, Mom quickly realized that teenagers do not wake up by themselves. My brother Luke missed his first period test. Olivia appeared at school lunch dressed in the same outfit from the previous day, her hair a tangled mess and without money for food. Mom received a disciplinary write-up at her downtown office for being 3 hours late, having completely forgotten about the morning routine. By Thursday, the house was telling a sordid tale of its own. I walked inside to find Luke wearing his gym clothes to regular classes because every other shirt reeked. Mom was on the phone, pleading with the electric company for an extension. She hadn't grasped that bills had rigid deadlines. "Juniper," my brother called out casually, as if everything was normal. "A small favor. Could you pick up some deodorant when you go out?" "I apologize, but that sounds like overstepping my sibling boundaries." "Come on, sis, don't be so childish." "Childish?" I pulled up the signed agreement on my phone. This explicitly states sibling duties only. Shopping for you constitutes mothering. He grumbled something about me being overly emotional and walked away. The pungent odor remained with him for another week. Olivia had her orchestra recital scheduled for Saturday. I observed from the audience as she stepped onto the stage in her creased, stained formal dress, the one I usually had dry cleaned. Other parents whispered, and children pointed. When her teacher later approached Mom about the issue with the dress code, I spoke up, ensuring my voice carried clearly across the lobby. "Oh, we had a family restructuring," I replied cheerfully. I was overstepping by managing her concert attire, so now Mom is in charge for the first time ever. Isn't that right, Mom? Mom's face went white as other parents turned to stare. "We're reorganizing responsibilities. She made me sign an agreement," I explained to the teacher, displaying the document. "I'm not permitted to step in as their mother anymore, just a sister. No more Juniper dictatorship." The teacher's expression shifted from confusion to grave concern. Olivia ran to the restroom in tears, while Mom stood motionless, surrounded by scrutinizing parents. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. Miss Reynolds, the guidance counselor, was calling. "Juniper, I'm contacting you about serious concerns regarding your siblings' well-being. Multiple faculty members have reported—" "I have zero authority over my siblings," I informed her. "They made that explicitly clear." "But you've always handled—" "No. They have established their boundaries, and my role is to respect them."
25 minutes later, my mother burst into my room, tears streaming down her face. "Juniper, please, CPS is on their way. If they see the house like this..." "Like what?" "You know perfectly well. The dirty dishes, the overflowing laundry, the bare refrigerator, your brother's failing grades." "Wow, that sounds like a massive amount of mothering work. Good thing you are here to take care of it. I am begging you, just this one time, help me tidy up before they ring the bell." The doorbell chimed. We both froze. The woman knocked. "Hello, Mrs. Langston, Child Protective Services. We have received multiple alarming reports." Mom glanced at me, completely terrified. I offered a gentle smile.
Through the doorway, I watched the social worker's gaze assess the chaos. Filthy dishes covered in mold in the sink. Garbage overflowing. My brother had been wearing the same gym uniform since Monday. She stepped over the threshold, and her entire expression changed. The foul odor hit her first. I could tell by the way her nose wrinkled. Then her eyes widened as she surveyed the kitchen, which had green, fuzzy growth on dishes piled everywhere and garbage bags stacked against the wall, buzzing with flies. Luke stood there in the same crusty jersey from 6 days prior, with large yellow stains under his arms. The social worker immediately pulled out her agency tablet and began taking photographs of everything. Mom stood rigid like a statue as the camera clicked repeatedly. The woman walked into the living room, taking more pictures of pizza boxes on the floor and the mountain of dirty clothes on the sofa. She opened the fridge and recoiled a step, realizing it was completely empty, save for a rotting container of former leftovers. Mom finally snapped out of her trance and started speaking rapidly. "This is simply an unusually difficult week. We are typically much more organized than this." The social worker turned to her with a look that showed she wasn't buying it. "Mrs. Langston, we have received numerous reports from your children's school district over the last 2 weeks concerning consistent issues." She pulled something up on her tablet. "Your son has worn the same clothing for days. Your daughter appeared at her recital in inappropriate attire. Both children have mentioned to their teachers that they are hungry." Mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "I need to speak with each child individually, beginning with Juniper." She motioned toward the dining room table, which was the only clear surface because I had been using it for my own schoolwork. Mom started to follow us, but the social worker raised a hand. "Privately, Mrs. Langston." We sat down and she gave me a kind look. "Juniper, I understand there have been significant shifts in your household lately." I took out my phone and showed her the agreement I had saved in my photo gallery. "My mother made me sign this 3 weeks ago." Her brow furrowed as she read the contents. "She forced you to sign this?" I confirmed it. "She told me I was making everything about myself and that I should focus only on sibling tasks." The woman typed notes on her tablet. "What precisely were you responsible for before this agreement?" I took a deep breath. "Everything." She looked up at me and asked, "Can you be more specific?" So I began listing it all. I woke them up every morning at 6 a.m., made breakfast, prepared packed lunches, ensured they had clean clothes, assisted with their homework every evening, cooked dinner, managed all the laundry, paid the bills online because Mom doesn't understand banking apps, scheduled their dental appointments, and attended parent-teacher conferences when Mom was too busy. The social worker's fingers moved rapidly across her tablet screen. "How long have you been doing all of this?" I did the mental calculation. "Since I was 11? She paused her typing. 11 years old? I nodded. Mom had a new boyfriend who wasn't fond of having kids around, so she was frequently absent. The woman requested specific examples, and I recounted everything. How I educated Olivia about her period when it started, and Mom didn't even notice. How I had to forge Mom's signature on permission slips because she kept forgetting. I learned to cook by watching videos on YouTube because we couldn't afford takeout every evening, and Mom only knew how to make instant ramen. She wanted to see Olivia next, and my sister walked in with matted hair and food stains on the front of her shirt. When the social worker asked her how things had been recently, Olivia burst into tears. "I'm constantly hungry," she sobbed. "Mom doesn't purchase groceries, and I don't have lunch money, and the only thing I can prepare is cereal, but we ran out of milk."
She told the woman about the recital and how everyone mocked her clothing. Juniper always made sure it was clean and pressed, but now nobody does it, and Mom didn't even know it needed to be dry cleaned. She confessed she didn't know how to operate the washing machine or the oven, or even how to properly wash her own hair because I had always done it all. Luke entered next, looking annoyed, as if his time was being wasted. The social worker asked him about his clothing situation. "Yeah, I've been wearing this for a while," he said, shrugging. "I don't know how to do laundry." She pressed him to elaborate, and he became defensive. "No one ever taught me, okay? Juniper just always handled it." He informed her about failing his examination because no one woke him up, and his mother had no idea what subjects he was taking. She tried to help me with my math homework yesterday, but she didn't know what algebra was. The social worker asked about meals, and he stated they had been eating mostly cereal and whatever processed snacks were left from before. "I used the last of my graduation money on a burger yesterday." Finally, it was Mom's turn, and she walked in with her head held high, as if she were about to resolve everything. We could hear snippets of the conversation from the living room, with the social worker asking about schedules and Mom not knowing what time school began. When asked about the children's teachers, Mom couldn't name a single one. Mom was unaware of Olivia's pollen allergy or Luke's requirement for reading glasses. Then Mom's voice escalated. "This is entirely Juniper's fault. She's being malicious because I made her sign that agreement." The social worker's voice remained even-tempered. "Mrs. Langston, regardless of what Juniper is or is not doing, you are the adult and parent here." Mom started rambling about how I was trying to sabotage her, but the woman cut her off. "Can you state your son's grade level, your daughter's shoe size, or when their last medical checkups were?" Silence.
The social worker returned and made a few phone calls right in front of us. "Yes, we require immediate action," she told someone. "The home is currently uninhabitable. There is obvious neglect. The children lack adequate nutrition and suitable clothing." Mom began weeping and clutched my arm. "Tell them you'll assist. Tell them this is just temporary." I stared at her calmly. "You made me sign a legal agreement, remember?" Within an hour, 2 more CPS workers arrived with notebooks and cameras. They toured every area, documenting and photographing. They found a bathroom with black mold growing in the shower and a toilet that hadn't been cleaned in 3 weeks. They cataloged the empty refrigerator, overflowing garbage, and the mountain of dirty dishes. One of them discovered Olivia's soiled underwear in her room from when she got her period that week and didn't know what to do with it, simply leaving it on the floor. When they asked her about it, she broke down crying again, stating she didn't know how to manage without me. The case supervisor arrived in a dark SUV and reviewed the file. She was an older woman with silver hair who looked like she'd witnessed everything. After reviewing all the images and notes, she turned to Mom with a solemn look. "Mrs. Langston, based on our findings here today, we are placing both minor children in emergency protective custody." Mom fell to her knees, sobbing. "Please, no. I just need a little more time to sort things out." The supervisor shook her head firmly. "Ma'am, your children are residing in unsanitary and dangerous conditions without proper care or supervision." The supervisor's statement hung in the air for a long moment before Mom completely collapsed. She wabbed the supervisor's pants and began crying with loud, wet sounds that made everyone uncomfortable. The supervisor took a step back and signaled the other personnel, who immediately went upstairs. I could hear them taking luggage from the hallway closet and opening drawers in my siblings' bedrooms. Olivia ran after them, screaming that they couldn't touch her belongings, but one of the workers gently blocked her path, explaining they were only packing some necessities. Luke stood still in the living room doorway, as if his brain couldn't process the reality. In less than 15 seconds, his expression cycled from confused to angry to fearful. The workers returned with 2 small suitcases that looked tragically insufficient for everything my siblings would need for an unknown period. Olivia was crying hysterically, mucus running down her face, her whole body shaking. She kept looking at me as if I was supposed to fix this, but I simply sat there, my hands folding.
Luke finally broke out of his frozen state and began arguing with the supervisor about how everything was a complete misunderstanding. She calmly stated that the decision had been finalized and they needed to accompany her now. Mom lunged at me, grasping my arms so tightly that her fingernails dug into my skin. "Please, Juniper, just tell them you'll help." Her face was inches from mine, and I could smell the stale coffee on her breath. "Tell them you'll take care of everything like you always do." I carefully removed her fingers from my arm, one by one. "You made me sign a document that I wouldn't parent them anymore." She began shaking me and yelling that I was being cruel, but the supervisor pulled her away. The social worker turned to me as the others dealt with Mom. "Juniper, since you are over 19, you are not obligated to come with us, but do you have a safe place to stay?" I nodded and told her I had already made arrangements to stay with my friend Tess and would be moving out regardless. She looked visibly relieved and gave me her business card in case I needed to contact her. The workers began escorting Olivia and Luke toward the front door, and then everything imploded. Olivia spun around and screamed at me, "This is all your fault. You did this deliberately." Her voice was so high it cracked. "You wanted us to be taken away." Luke simply stared at me with an expression I had never witnessed. It was as if he had finally understood that his actions had consequences, and he despised the realization. They put the kids into a black SUV while Mom ran after them, begging for just one more minute. The supervisor had to physically prevent her from entering the vehicle. I watched from the window as the SUV drove away, my siblings' faces pressed against the rear glass. Mom remained in the driveway for another half hour, staring at the empty space where the car had been. I packed my own small bag and called Tess to come and get me. Her mother picked me up an hour later and asked no questions when she noticed my red, swollen eyes. That night, I sat on Tess's bed, my phone buzzing incessantly. Mom had called 19 times and left 10 voicemail messages. Her first 4 were screams about how I had ruined her life. The next 3 were her crying and pleading with me to return home and help her get them back. The final 3 alternated between accusing me, offering a shaky apology, and blaming me again. I powered off my phone and attempted to sleep, but I kept visualizing Luke's expression as the reality finally dawned on him.
Tess's mother had just finished preparing blueberry pancakes for breakfast when we heard a frantic pounding on the front door. Mom stood there looking like she hadn't slept, her hair sticking up wildly and yesterday's makeup smeared beneath her eyes. "I know she's here." She shoved past Tess's father to locate me in the kitchen. "You are coming home right now, and we are going to fix this." Tess's father stood between us and instructed her that she needed to leave immediately. Mom began screaming about me being her daughter and how she had the right to make me return. Tess's mother calmly picked up the landline phone and stated she would dial the police if Mom did not depart immediately. Mom gave me one final hateful glare before storming away. She slammed the door so violently that a framed picture fell off the wall. 3 days passed before I received a call from Miss Reynolds at the school. "Juniper, I heard about what occurred and wanted to check in on you." Her tone was genuinely friendly and concerned. "I also want you to know that I am proud of you for protecting yourself." She informed me that the public school system offered counseling services if I needed them, and that they would support me throughout this process. She recounted how several teachers had been worried about my siblings for weeks and felt relieved that someone had finally intervened. 5 days later, I received an official notice for a family court hearing to determine temporary custody. I spent the morning printing copies of the signed agreement, screenshots of Mom's texts from the previous weeks, and photos I'd taken of the house's decay. I organized everything into a folder and dressed in a professional suit. The courthouse was downtown in an old brick building that smelled of floor wax and aged documents. I arrived early and sat outside the courtroom, observing other families enter and exit. Mom arrived 20 minutes late, wearing the same wrinkled shirt she had worn 5 days earlier. Her hair was oily and twisted back into a messy ponytail. She had deep circles under her eyes and was constantly checking her phone, as if someone was waiting for her to arrive. I knew her boyfriend must have left when the situation became serious, because she was completely alone.
The court bailiff summoned us, and the judge was an older woman with silver hair and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She began by reviewing the CPS report, reading aloud sections regarding the condition of the home and the children's statements. Then she questioned Mom about her parenting capabilities. Mom started strong, stating she had been overwhelmed but was prepared to do better. The judge questioned her specifically about Olivia's medical needs. Mom's mind went blank, and she couldn't recall what medication Olivia took for her allergies. The judge inquired about Luke's learning accommodation plan, which the school had sent home on multiple occasions. Mom had no idea he even had one. The judge looked at Mom for a long time before motioning to the bailiff and instructing him to bring Olivia and Luke into her private chambers. They both jumped up in confusion and followed her through the heavy wooden door behind the bench. Mom kept wringing her hands and staring at me as if I could magically fix the situation.
25 minutes passed, with only the sound of the courthouse clock ticking. When the door finally opened, Olivia walked out first, her eyes puffy, and she refused to look at me. Luke hurried behind her, pale and clearly shaken, as if he had just been told a devastating truth. They sat back down, and the judge waited another 8 minutes to write notes before speaking. She declared that based on the home inspection, the children's testimonies, and Mom's clear lack of fundamental parenting skills, she was ordering both children to remain in foster care. Mom would be required to enroll in a 12-week parenting course and individual therapy sessions. She'd also have to pass monthly home inspections before the court would consider the reinstatement of custody. Mom began sobbing so loudly that the bailiff had to urge her to compose herself. Mom's phone started ringing right as the judge was detailing the visitation plan. She fumbled to silence it, but I could see the work number on the screen. The phone rang again 45 seconds later. The judge advised her that if it was an emergency, she could step out to answer it. Mom took the call from the hallway, but we could all hear her through the door. Her employer informed her that due to her repeated tardiness and absences over the last 2 weeks, they would have to terminate her employment. She attempted to explain the court situation, but they stated she had already exhausted all her sick and vacation time. Mom returned looking utterly defeated. The judge concluded by scheduling the next hearing for 4 months out and dismissing us. I exited first and was heading to the parking structure when I heard someone call my name. A woman with graying hair and a nose identical to Mom's approached me. It was Mom's sister, my Aunt Gabrielle, whom I hadn't seen since I was around 11. She said she'd heard everything from a cousin and wanted to confirm if it was as awful as reported. She told me she had no idea things had deteriorated so much and felt terrible for not checking in more frequently. Her residence had an empty bedroom and she invited me to stay with her. I thanked her but emphasized that after 9 years of raising my siblings, I needed to concentrate on my own life. She nodded, understanding, and handed me a piece of paper with her contact number, instructing me to call if I ever reconsidered. Mom walked past us without speaking and gave me another hateful glare.
A week passed, and I was working at the City Lights bookstore when a coworker mentioned seeing Luke at the Safeway grocery store with an elderly couple. She said he appeared unhappy and was arguing with them about something minor. Later that day, I received a text from one of Luke's friends informing me that the siblings were placed in different foster families on opposite sides of Salt Lake City. Luke seemed to be struggling with all the new rules, such as regular bedtimes and chore schedules. Luke, according to the friend, kept complaining about having to request permission for everything when I used to simply handle things without a fuss. 2 days later, I received an email from Olivia's orchestra teacher. She informed me that Olivia had to quit the program because her foster family lived 50 minutes away from the school. The teacher responded that she was heartbroken to lose such a gifted student and asked if there was any possible workaround. I wrote back stating that I was no longer Olivia's guardian and that she should contact CPS.
The teacher replied that she understood, but it was a tragedy because Olivia had immense talent. That weekend, I was finishing schoolwork when Mom called, weeping. She had just completed her first required parenting class and couldn't believe how little she actually knew. They'd spent 2 hours solely on basic child development, and she realized she had no idea what was considered normal for a 16 or 18-year-old. She pleaded with me to help her comprehend some of the course material, but I told her that would negate the entire purpose of the mandatory classes. She abruptly hung up on me. I began to focus on my own life for the first time since I was 9 years old. I took on extra shifts at the bookstore and started saving money for college applications. I learned that I could still apply for spring semester admission to the University of California, Berkeley, and began writing my application essays. One of my coworkers mentioned a support group for adults who had experienced parentification as children, so I decided to look into it. The meeting took place on Tuesday evenings in a church basement in Oakland. There were 9 other individuals there, all of different ages. The facilitator asked us to go around and share a little about our experiences. One woman discussed raising her 4 younger siblings while her mother worked 3 jobs. A young man my age recalled caring for his epileptic sister since he was 7, as his parents couldn't cope. Another girl had been managing her family's finances and appointments since middle school because her parents didn't speak English fluently.
When it was my turn, I told them about the agreement and the subsequent events. Nobody seemed surprised or condemned me for allowing my siblings to enter foster care. The facilitator stated that what I had endured was an abnormal and unacceptable situation and not my fault. She clarified that parentification is a form of emotional abuse, even when it doesn't appear conventionally abusive. Hearing other people's stories made me understand just how distorted my childhood had been. They all discussed the lingering guilt they felt when they stopped taking care of everyone else. One woman claimed it took her years of therapy to realize she was entitled to live her own life. The group provided me with books to read and websites to research about recovering from parentification. That same night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number asking if I could let him into the house to retrieve his belongings because Mom wasn't answering her phone. The message indicated it was Mom's ex-boyfriend, and he only wanted his work uniforms and company laptop. I looked at the message for about 5 seconds before blocking the number permanently. 4 weeks passed as I settled into a routine at my friend's house, working at the bookstore, attending support group sessions, and finally sleeping soundly through the night. Then on a Tuesday afternoon, while preparing a sandwich in Tess's kitchen, I heard a loud pounding on the front door. Tess's mother answered, and I heard Luke's strange, trembling voice requesting to speak with me. He stood there in dirty clothes with a backpack that was clearly too heavy for him, his eyes red and swollen from crying. He began rambling quickly about how he couldn't stay in the foster home any longer, how they had all these restrictive rules about screen time, chores, and homework checks, and how they forced him to be in bed by 10 p.m. every night, as if he were still in elementary school. He kept telling me that I understood him better than anyone and begged me to let him stay for a few nights until he figured things out. Tess's mother looked at me with a mixture of concern and uncertainty while Luke pleaded that he would sleep on the floor, eat very little, and assist with chores.
My hands shook as I took out my phone and dialed the CPS emergency number they had given me in court. Luke's expression instantly changed from hopeful to shocked to enraged when he realized what I was doing. He tried to snatch the phone from me, but Tess's mother stepped in between us. The CPS operator took down all his information and promised to send someone within an hour. Luke sat on the front steps, refusing to look at me or speak to anyone as we waited. The social worker who arrived was the same one who conducted the initial inspection, and she gave me a slight nod of approval as she led Luke to her car. She calmly mentioned that both children were having difficulty adjusting but were finally receiving the actual therapy and support services they had never had access to before. She explained that Luke had been acting out a lot in his placement, which was typical for children who had never had structure. After they drove away, I was sick in the bathroom and cried for 30 minutes. A week later, Mom called me, distraught over her latest home inspection. The CPS official had come to see if she had implemented the required changes to have the children returned. Mom stated that the worker took one look at the kitchen, which still had dishes piled up and old food spoiling on the counter, and immediately started taking notes. Mom hadn't figured out how to properly clean the mold that was growing in the shower. She attempted to do laundry, but left damp clothes in the washing machine for 5 days, which resulted in a terrible smell. The worker wanted to see the kids' rooms, but Mom hadn't even changed their bed sheets or picked up their discarded clothes from the floor. The judge extended the foster care placement for a minimum of another 4 months. Mom started crying about how unfair it was, how she was trying her absolute best, and how no one had ever taught her these basic life skills. The following Saturday, I was at the Trader Joe's grocery store buying instant soup and frozen pizza when I nearly ran into 2 of Mom's old book club acquaintances. They looked at me with utter disdain, speaking to each other loudly enough for me to overhear about how I had destroyed my own family and placed those poor children in foster care purely out of spite. Mom had clearly told everyone at her church how I had refused to help when CPS arrived and had intentionally made the situation worse. They walked away, shaking their heads and muttering about ungrateful children.
That same week, Tess's mother sat me down at their kitchen table with her laptop and a folder full of documents. She showed me how to open a checking account online, explained minimum balances and overdraft charges, and demonstrated how to deposit checks using a mobile app. She assisted me in completing the FAFSA for college financial aid, which I knew nothing about because my mother never mentioned it. She showed me how to establish credit with a secured credit card and recommended websites for finding rental apartments and understanding lease agreements. She made me practice writing checks and balancing a checkbook, even though she acknowledged most people no longer use them. She discussed health insurance, car insurance, and renter's insurance. Mom had never taught me any of these crucial adult skills. Olivia sent me a letter 3 days later, forwarded through the CPS office. Her handwriting was messier than usual, and the paper was stained with tears. She stated that I was selfish and heartless, and that I had deliberately ruined her life. She claimed I could have fixed everything, but chose to destroy the family instead. She wrote that she hated me and never wanted to see me again. She claimed her foster parents were mean and strict, and they didn't understand her the way I did. She blamed me for missing orchestra, falling behind in school, and not having any of her personal belongings. The letter stung more than anything Mom had ever said to me. My therapist at the support group helped me understand that Olivia was grappling with trauma and sadness, and that expressing anger was easier than admitting she was wrong or hurt. She emphasized that children often blame the safe person rather than the one who wounded them. 4 weeks later, Mom called again, crying because she had received an eviction notice. Without my bookstore earnings to help with the rent, and without me tracking when bills were due, she'd missed 4 months of payments. The landlord had stopped granting her extensions. She couldn't understand how the bills had accumulated so rapidly or why the late fees were so expensive. She claimed she tried to create a budget, but the numbers didn't make sense to her. She was wasting money on takeout every night because she didn't know how to properly plan meals or grocery shop efficiently. Her sister, my Aunt Gabrielle, who had previously offered to assist me, agreed to let Mom move in temporarily to the Seattle area. 2 months into the entire situation, I received a letter mandating family therapy. The judge had ordered all 4 of us to participate in a joint session with a court-appointed therapist. The letter stated that it was a requirement of the reunification process and that attendance was mandatory. The session was scheduled for the following Thursday at the courthouse.
Mom arrived looking markedly different than I had seen her in years. Her hair was neatly brushed and styled. She wore clean, coordinated clothes and appeared sober for once. She had lost weight and her eyes looked clearer. She sat across from me in the waiting area, but made no attempt to speak. When we were called in, the therapist asked us to sit in a circle, with her positioned between Mom and me. Olivia and Luke sat on the opposite side, looking visibly uncomfortable and irritated. The therapist began by asking Mom to share what she had learned from her parenting seminars. Mom spoke for 15 minutes on child development and age-appropriate expectations, and how she realized she had never known what children required at each stage. The therapist then asked her directly about my role in the family before everything collapsed. Mom fell silent and stared at her hands for a long moment. Finally, she looked up at me, tears streaming down her cheeks, and whispered the words I had been waiting 9 years to hear. She stated that she had forced me to become the parent, that she had stolen my childhood, and that she had been selfish, negligent, and wrong. She stated that she now understood that what she had done to me was a form of abuse, despite the fact that she had not physically harmed me or intended to cause pain. She stated that the parenting seminars had made her realize the extent of the damage she had inflicted on all of us. It was the first time she had ever accepted genuine responsibility for anything. But as I listened to her, all I felt was a profound emptiness, as it was far too late for apologies to repair the devastation she had caused. The therapist then asked Olivia how she felt about everything. Olivia's face crumpled and tears streamed down her cheeks as she looked at me with a mixture of anguish and rage that made my chest tighten. She wiped her nose on her sleeve and told the therapist that she missed me so much it hurt, but she also hated me for allowing everything to fall apart. She asked why I couldn't just fix things the way I always did. The therapist nodded and calmly explained that Olivia's anger toward me was likely intended for Mom, but it felt safer to be angry at me. She informed Olivia that I too was a child when I began caring for everyone, and that it was never supposed to be my obligation. Olivia started crying louder and harder until she was making small gasping sounds. The therapist offered her tissues and waited for her to calm down before turning to Luke. My brother sat there picking at a hole in his jeans and refusing to look at anyone. The therapist asked him 4 times before he mumbled that he realized what they had all done to me was wrong. He explained that he knew I was essentially raising children while Mom did nothing, but he didn't want to give up having someone do everything for him. He looked at me for about 3 seconds and apologized, but I could tell by the tone of his voice that he was mostly upset that his carefree life had ended. The therapist made notes on her clipboard for what seemed like an eternity before looking up at all of us. She recommended that we all continue with separate individual therapy before attempting to be a family unit again. She explained that Mom needed to demonstrate she could parent, and I needed time to discover who I was without the burden of caring for everyone. Mom nodded and promised to do whatever was necessary to bring the kids back, while I made it clear that I would not be returning to the house. The session concluded with the therapist scheduling individual follow-up visits for everyone and informing us that this would be a long, challenging process. 2 weeks after that session, I returned home from work to find a thick packet from the state university waiting for me. My hands shook as I opened it and read the acceptance letter, which promised me a full academic scholarship based on my grades and the essay I had written about my experience. I sat on Tess's bed staring at the letter because I never truly imagined I'd get the chance to go and start over somewhere new. Tess's mother found me crying and hugged me as I showed her the letter. She helped me complete all the housing applications and even drove me to campus for orientation. The scholarship covered everything, including textbooks and meal plans, allowing me to concentrate on my studies instead of holding 3 jobs. Meanwhile, Mom continued to attend parenting classes at the community center on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She called once to let me know she had passed her first test on child development milestones. I could tell she was genuinely proud of herself for knowing what temperature to wash clothes at and how to check if meat was fully cooked. 8 weeks after the children were placed in foster care, she passed her second home inspection at my Aunt Gabrielle's residence. The judge reviewed all her progress reports and granted supervised visitation with Olivia and Luke beginning the following Saturday. Mom arrived 20 minutes late for the first appointment because she got lost finding the supervision center. The social worker had to remind her 3 times about the rules, which included not discussing the court case or making empty promises about when they would return home. Olivia spent the majority of the hour showing Mom her math homework while Luke played with his phone and barely spoke.
The second visit went better because Mom remembered to bring snacks, but she forgot Olivia was allergic to peanuts and brought peanut butter and crackers. On her third visit, she arrived promptly with safe snacks, but was unable to assist Luke with his history project due to her lack of knowledge about the American Civil War. She kept mixing up key dates and battle outcomes until Luke became frustrated and stopped asking. After 3 months of supervised visitation, the judge reevaluated everything and ruled Mom could see the children on weekends. They would remain with their foster family during the week for structure and academic support, but would spend Friday evening through Sunday with Mom. Mom picked them up 2 hours late the first weekend because she forgot the school's dismissal time. She wasn't aware that Olivia had orchestra rehearsal on Saturdays or that Luke worked at the local hardware store on Sunday mornings. Mom gradually improved her recollection of their routines over the course of 4 months, but she still made occasional mistakes. The judge determined that the arrangement was successful enough to continue. During the week, the children enjoyed a stable environment with foster parents who knew how to help them with homework and ensure they got to school on time.
August arrived, and I packed my entire life into 2 suitcases and a backpack for college. Tessa's parents drove me to campus and helped me carry my belongings to my 3rd-floor dorm room. My roommate was already there, unpacking what looked like her entire bedroom from home, complete with fairy lights and decorative pillows. She complained that her mother had already called 6 times that day to check on how she was adjusting. Right, I said, nodding, because I couldn't relate to having a mother who cared that much. That first week of classes felt like I had stepped onto another planet where no one knew my troubled history. I could simply be a typical college student, worried about choosing classes and locating the dining hall. 4 weeks into the semester, Olivia sent me a notification on Instagram. She messaged me a picture of herself standing next to a washing machine with the caption, "My foster mom taught me how to separate colors from whites." It wasn't much, but I was grateful that she wanted to spend this moment with me after everything. I liked the photo and responded with a heart emoji. A month later, Luke messaged me on Facebook, asking if I could review his college application essay. He began typing that he needed assistance with his grammar, but then stopped and wrote another message saying, "Never mind," because he remembered I wasn't supposed to help anymore. We both texted those crying, laughing emojis, and something about admitting how strange things had become made everything feel a little less heavy. Mom stuck to the weekend visitation routine and was usually on time. The social worker's reports consistently mentioned minor improvements, such as Mom remembering to prepare bagged lunches and asking about homework, even when she couldn't help with it. The judge reviewed everything at the next hearing and determined Mom could keep the children for the entire spring break week to see how she handled the increased responsibility. I watched from my dorm room as Olivia posted images of them at the local park, and Luke shared a video of Mom attempting to prepare pancakes from scratch instead of a mix. The pancakes looked terrible, but everyone was laughing about it, which was a sight I had never witnessed before. When the week finished without any major incidents, the judge authorized full reunification beginning after the school year concluded. Mom still had to continue attending therapy and parenting programs, but the children would live with her full-time at my Aunt Gabrielle's house. My aunt had effectively taken over the responsibility of paying bills and purchasing groceries, while Mom focused on learning how to parent. Mom texted me 4 weeks after they moved back, asking if I wanted to come for dinner on Saturday. I stared at my phone for 30 minutes before replying yes. The drive to my aunt's house felt strange because I had never been there as a visitor before. When I walked in, the smell hit me first. Actual food cooking rather than takeout containers everywhere. The living room still had toys scattered throughout, but it was no longer a disaster zone. Mom walked out of the kitchen wearing an apron I'd never seen and with flour dusted in her hair. She had made spaghetti from a jar and garlic bread from the freezer, but the table was set with proper plates and napkins. Olivia handed me her report card after supper, pointing to each mark as if it were a trophy. 2 C's, 3 B's, and 1 A- in art history class. She explained that she had to study now, instead of me doing everything, but her foster mother had taught her how to use flashcards. The grades weren't as perfect as when I did her schoolwork, but she had earned them all by herself. Luke took out his phone and showed me photos of the Target grocery section where he worked 3 evenings a week stocking shelves. He'd already saved $500 and decided to purchase an old Ford once he had enough. His manager said he was one of the most reliable employees they had, which made him feel a sense of pride I had never seen before.
After dinner, Mom asked if we could talk outside while the kids did their assigned dishes, which was clearly their new chore. She sat on the front steps and began crying before she could say anything. She informed me that her therapist had helped her see exactly what she had done to me and how she had taken 9 years of my childhood. She apologized for forcing me to be the parent, that she had stolen my childhood, and that she had been selfish, negligent, and wrong. She claimed she couldn't remember half of my upbringing because she was too focused on men and parties to pay attention. Her hands shook as she described how the parenting classes taught her fundamental things she had never known, such as checking homework folders and scheduling doctor appointments. She explained that observing other parents in the class made her realize how much she had failed all of us, but especially me. I didn't know what to say, so I sat there and listened to her list everything she wished she could undo. When we returned inside, Olivia was waiting by the door, looking anxious. She asked if she could give me a hug, and when I said yes, she put her arms around me tighter than she ever had before. She apologized for being cruel and for not understanding what I had been doing all those years. Her foster mother had stressed that I was also just a child and shouldn't have been responsible for parenting them. She said she now understood why I had to let things fall apart and commended me for being brave enough to save myself, even if it meant causing them temporary pain. She pulled back and showed me a bracelet she'd made in therapy with beads spelling out sister. She'd made one for herself too, so we could match, like real sisters. Luke walked over and did that awkward male thing where he lightly punched my shoulder and said, "Thanks for making all of us finally grow up." He admitted that what they were doing to me was awful, but he preferred that someone else handle things, so he didn't have to. He stated that losing everything made him realize how much I was carrying and how unfair it was for them to expect it. 7 months had passed since the initial CPS visit, and while nothing was flawless, everything had changed. Mom could now prepare 6 different simple meals, all of which were basic, such as tacos and instant pasta. The children managed their own laundry and homework without constant oversight. I was taking college classes that I genuinely enjoyed and making friends who didn't know my entire history. Mom would never win any parenting awards, but she was making a sincere effort for the first time in their lives. My siblings had learned to function normally as teenagers rather than expecting others to do everything for them. And I had finally understood that protecting myself wasn't a selfish act. It was the most important thing I'd ever done for all of us. If this narrative resonated with you, please consider supporting our channel for more genuine stories of family resilience. Thank you for watching.